Welcome to Community Spotlight. I'm your host, Leah Longbreak. Today's Spotlight is on the City of Cleveland's Department of Building and Housing. With us is Ayonna Blue-Donald, who is the Director of Building and Housing. Yes. Welcome, Director.
Thank you for having me today.
Yes. Start by telling us how long you've been with the Department of Building and Housing.
I've been with the department for 7 years. It's been just a variety of different positions. I actually started as a temporary employee, as a temporary legal secretary as part of our Vacant Property initiative. And then I just progressed on as a paralegal demolition contract specialist, so hence my love for demolition. Moved on to assistant director, and now I've been director for 2 years.
Wow. You actually have a law background, correct?
I do. I practiced law for a couple years. I'm licensed in Texas, and I went to law school in California, so it gives me a certain edge as being director, and I'm also an engineer. I went undergrad at Case Western, so go Spartans, and attained a mechanical engineering degree. So that's also interesting, an interesting twist to what I do day to day in the building and housing department.
And I read that you also work with patents.
Yeah, well, technically, yes. I am registered with the USPTO, United States Patent and Trademark Office, to be a patent attorney, but I've kind of left that behind me and moved on to, I really like working in government. It's just really pleasing and comforting to me. I come from a background of doing a lot of community service, et cetera, and it's a nice mix to be able to mix community service and helping people with my job, because people think of building and housing maybe as just like permits and tearing down buildings, et cetera, but you really are improving the quality of life of people and citizens here in the city of Cleveland, so I just really enjoy it.
So tell us, with the Department of Building and Housing, what are the different pieces and parts within the organization? Because it's not just one big department.
Yeah. So in general, our department, we have about 160 staff members. That's how many we're budgeted for. And we're broken up into 3 divisions. We have the director's office, which is just mainly like our finance and administrative functions. We have code enforcement, which is our largest section. Mainly, most of our staff, the largest section of our staff is in code enforcement. We have a little over probably 80 inspectors right about now and other clerical staff inspecting them. So our code enforcement section, they do everything from the nice shiny things, from the new buildings and the new hotels and the new healthcare centers and everything that's popping up around the city, and inspecting those and those permits, or be it a shed in your backyard that you're putting up just in a residential neighborhood. We inspect all those things, and then we do the other end of code enforcement, which is, if people are having issues taking care of their properties, we remind them if there are code violations that are present and need to be fixed. And then our third division is construction and permitting. So that's our probably most customer facing department that we have. There we have registered architects and professional engineers that review all the plans that are submitted for anything, from the beginning and end of any project here in the city. And then we have our permit intake specialists that just really do a good job, I think, in giving good customer service and explaining things. I mean, at any given time, you have people that come into the city. You have the all-the-timers that come and pull a lot of permits. You have the some-timers that, maybe they come once a year to pull something. And you have the people that may only come down to City Hall one time ever to pull a permit for that one particular thing that they're doing at their home. So we try to deliver the same great customer service to everyone.
Speaking of homes, home improvement. Many people are working on various things within their household, and there are some things that do need a permit. What exactly, when it comes to home improvement projects, need a permit, and what you don't need to bother coming downtown for?
Well, first, I'd also like to state how important it is to pull a permit, because people kind of miss that in the sense of, and I don't, you see in the news a lot, like people getting taken advantage of with scams. And so that's one function of the building department, to hopefully try to prevent that from happening. We have a system in which contractors are registered. They're bonded and insured before they can pull a permit in the city of Cleveland. So if you are at any point in time thinking about any type of work, things that need permits, roof work, actual window replacement needs a permit, any type of plumbing, if you're getting a hot water heater, a furnace, if you're installing a toilet, things that don't commonly need work, like, say you're just repairing a wall in your home, it doesn't. But if you're installing or removing like a load-bearing wall, that would be something that you would want to come see us about a permit, because we want to make sure that the structure is still safe after you make whatever alteration. Exterior alterations, like if you're painting, that doesn't need a permit. Of course, we ask that you do the work in like a lead safe type of manner. If you are doing driveway and sidewalk work, that does not require a permit from Building and Housing, would require a permit from other city departments. But it is important to pull a permit because sometimes a contractor may say, oh, you know, you don't really need a permit. But if that contractor walks away from the job or doesn't do the work in a code compliant manner, if a permit has not been pulled, then it kind of leaves Building and Housing, we can't enforce on your behalf in the sense of enforce a claim against a bond if something needs to be fixed. Yeah. So we strongly encourage people to have permits pulled, and you can always check online. You can call us if you have a question about, hey, is this contractor, are they registered, or are they doing what they're supposed to do? And we will gladly answer those questions.
How does one go about getting a permit? Is it something you can just fill out online? Do you need to come to City Hall? Mm-hmm.
You can do either. We have implemented every permit that our department issues, you can apply for online. If you just go to the city's website and drill down to Building and Housing, you can go to a site, or you can Google Citizens Access for the city of Cleveland. It'll take you to a site and you can apply for a permit. So if that's just basic roofing, a lot of times people come down, they have questions about, hey, you want to restore electrical service to a building. Maybe it was vacant, or maybe just, you know, hadn't moved out for a while. And the electric companies require a meter-based inspection. That's like a real common, real basic permit. You don't have to come all the way down to City Hall if you don't want to. You can do it online. Or you can come to City Hall. We like visitors. On the 5th floor in room 505. They're open from 8 until 4 o'clock, and you can just walk in and, you know, sign your name on the log and pull a permit.
Great. So some properties need to be registered. What particular ones need to be?
So we do have a rental registration program. So all properties that are rental units have to be registered. So there is a difference. There are exemptions, but even with the exemptions, that exempts you from paying the fee. Currently, right now, there is a $35 fee. There was legislation passed a little bit over a month ago that increased that fee to $70. So with the next invoice cycle, which will happen next year, that fee will be increased to $70. This year until the remainder of the year will be $35. So that's $35, or really quoting the new price, $70 per unit that has to be registered. So if you're a landlord and you have properties out there, even if it's 1 unit, or if you have a building that's 100 units, each unit has to be registered with the city.
So you mentioned one of the divisions within the department is with code violations, code enforcement. What kind of properties would we look for when it comes to code enforcement, and how does that whole process work?
That process, it's mainly complaint driven. So a lot of the power and accessibility of our inspectors and what we do is based on complaints, meaning you have a property next door to you, you think there's illegal auto repair going on. You give us a call and you put in a complaint, and once that complaint is in, generally a routine complaint, which that would be like, say, if there's some exterior maintenance, like you think a gutter is hanging on your neighbor's property, if there maybe trash and debris. We have about 30 days essentially to respond to that complaint. So once the complaint's in the system, is routed to the appropriate inspector or assigned to that person, and then they go out and check out to see what's going on. Now, one thing with violations, it's kind of, it's interesting because our violations, if we end up prosecuting them, meaning we issue a violation notice and the owner does not fix the issue, we can put that person into housing court. And in housing court, essentially, the penalty is a criminal penalty. It's either a minor misdemeanor of the first degree or a minor misdemeanor. So they're both criminal penalties. So we take that job really seriously, and we try not to abuse that at all. So with that being said, when someone calls in a complaint, I'm just using illegal auto repair because it's real common, and you say, oh, well, the neighbor is doing work in his backyard that he shouldn't be. Well, we have to actually see it happen. So sometimes we'll get complaints and there'll be pictures attached, et cetera, and it's very hard to use that information in order for us to write a violation and then pursue that in court, because we like to have like firsthand knowledge from our inspectors that things are happening. So if something like that is happening, it's also important, maybe you can be a little bit more detailed, because if the illegal auto repair is happening maybe like after 5 p.m., well, my inspectors generally are off work at 3:30, 4 o'clock. So we're not out during the time sometimes that things are happening, but if you let us know like special circumstances so we can catch somebody in action, or a bad actor doing things, we can kind of try to solve those things. But violations, they range. You know, there can be things just as simple as, like for elevators, for instance, maybe somebody didn't get the proper inspection or report that they were supposed to. It seems real minor. We issue a violation notice, but we take it seriously because, of course, we want elevators to be safe and for occupants to be able to ride safely and not be concerned about those things. So I just tell people, if you have any concerns, give us a call, file a complaint, and then we'll go check it out and we'll investigate. If it's something we need to issue a violation for, we will. If not, we won't.
Is there a list of violations that's accessible?
Yes and no. I mean, all of our violations essentially are rooted in either our Ohio Building Code, if it's like a commercial building, or mainly the Cleveland Codified Ordinances. So essentially, you could look at the Cleveland Codified Ordinances and see, hey, these are all the types of things that you can't do. You know, you can't park on a vacant lot, you're not supposed to park on grass, or et cetera. I mean, there's a whole host of things. I mean, there are a lot of things that technically you're not supposed to do in the city.
Now, if you're on the receiving end of a code enforcement violation, what is your next step then?
If you receive a violation, essentially that violation outlines everything that essentially we found. So let's just take an exterior maintenance violation. That could be like a peeling paint, a hanging gutter, and maybe have a couple missing steps on your porch. So it will outline specifically what are the issues, but then it will give you a timeline. Depending on what the violation is, generally speaking, most all violations are about 30 days. So you have 30 days to comply or fix the issue. But you also have opportunities to say, hey, well, maybe I need more time. Formally, you can file a appeal with the Board of Building Standards located in City Hall on the 5th floor. You can come in and you can file an appeal, and then it'll be set for a hearing. You say, hey, I kind of need more time, you know, maybe this is just not, you don't have the finances right now to do it. And you say, hey, well, I really need 6 months to kind of pull this together. And, you know, the board hears it and they issue a decision. But also, if you are showing progress, so say it was a peeling paint, broken steps, and a hanging gutter, but my inspector comes back out after the 30 days and notices, hey, you fixed the gutter, you fixed the step, but maybe you haven't gotten around to the paint. We try to work with people because we understand that, you know, most people that are living in homes, if they're owners, it's their investment and they want to keep it up and they want to do the right thing. Or even if you're a landlord, it's your business. So you want to do the right thing to just perpetuate and keep your business going. Yeah. Or even if you're a tenant, I mean, you're living there and this is your home. So we do understand that.
Well, we have a lot more to get to, including about abandoned properties, but we need to take a quick break. So don't change that channel. We'll be right back with more Community Spotlight.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. I have a mentor, and she convinced me to continue my education. No one receives a diploma alone. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org.
Welcome back to Community Spotlight. I'm your host, Leah Longbreak. Today's Spotlight is on the Department of Building and Housing with the City of Cleveland, and with us is the Director, Ayonna Blue-Donald. Welcome back.
Thank you.
So before the break, we talked about code enforcement, and now that's going to lead us to vacant properties. How do you get a property boarded up? How does that process work?
Yes. So generally speaking, with a board up, you can just call the complaint line. You can call 311. You can call our department directly at 664-2282, I believe, or the main line of the city, 664-2000. You call in a complaint and you let us know a property is vacant, abandoned, and needs to be boarded. Now keep in mind, for a boarded structure, if a door like has a screen door or storm door and it closes and locks, we won't board that. If a property is vacant but the windows are closed and can't be opened, we don't board that as well. And we don't board second story openings. We only board first floor, basement. For a variety of reasons, liability for our contractors, when our inspectors go in to actually inspect these properties, if we have every opening boarded, it tends to be a little dangerous because the whole property is dark. The property is not electrified, there's no electricity, there's no lights to turn on. And some of these properties, quite frankly, they are dangerous. They have critters living inside of them. We've come across people living inside of vacant properties. They may have holes in the floor and missing steps, et cetera. So we just want to try to make things as safe as possible for our inspectors. But when you call in with a complaint, we then send an inspector out to verify what openings need to be boarded. We turn that information over to a board up contractor. We have board up contractors working throughout the city that just essentially it should take them 5 days to board it. So if you think you turn in a complaint, it'll take us about 5 days to go out and make sure what's open and what's not. It should take a board up contractor about 5 days to service that request that we make to them, and then the property gets boarded. I also commonly tell people that if we come out and we board a structure, you'll know we boarded it because all of our boards are gray, are painted gray. So if you see things that are just flat brown plywood, that's not us, that's the owner or mortgage company, et cetera. But if they're gray, that's us. And if after we've come out and boarded, if the structure gets reopened, please contact us again, because I only have a small amount of inspectors that actually go out and do the board up work. So we can't be everywhere all the time in all 17 wards. And quite frankly, people, once we board up a structure, they get back in them. So we try to remain really diligent. If a property gets back open, call us back and we will come back out and board it. We have an endless amount of times to board a structure. And also keeping in mind, once we board a structure, we bill the property owner. It is not inherently a free service that is offered to a person that has essentially walked away from a property and left a vacant and nuisance building. If we board it, if we provide a service to that building, that property owner gets a bill and an invoice from us.
Oh, interesting. So, because I'm sure a lot of people walk away just saying they're going to foreclose on the home. And you mentioned owners boarding up themselves. Is that permitted? Is that allowed?
Yes, it absolutely is allowed. We would strongly encourage that for people to take responsibility for their properties and board them up themselves. And then also there's, as an aside to board up, even if we board up a structure, if an owner wants to come back and take the boards off or, like reoccupy the structure, because every structure we board is not necessarily condemned. It's just that we want to prevent casual entry into a vacant structure. We don't want kids wandering into vacant buildings that aren't quite secure. Maybe someone's taken the door off or maybe the lock is broken, but the interior of the property is still pretty okay. Yeah. So if someone wants to come back in a property that's not condemned, they have more than that right. If they want to install like really a secure door that's not quite a board, because boards, they aren't the most attractive thing ever, but they get the job done for preventing people from getting in them.
So ones that are condemned, that lead to being demolished, how does that process work then? This is all process, obviously.
It definitely is.
But demolishing is something that we've been seeing more commonly. A lot of homes have.
Yeah, and since the mayor's taken office, since 2006, we've had a lot of demolitions. The city alone has raised over 10,700 structures throughout the city. We have a partner in the Cuyahoga County Land Bank. They tear down a great deal as well, but we've torn down the majority of structures. But the process, it is lengthy, because essentially for a condemned structure, or to get to that process or to that point, we take a complaint or an inspector sees a property out and it's bad. We think maybe we should get in. We do a sidewalk survey, because keep in mind that 99.9% probably of the properties that we tear down, the city does not own. Private individuals, John Smith, Mary Sue, whoever, they own these properties, and I can't just go into, and nor would anyone really, you wouldn't want me to, just go into a property without someone's permission. So I stand on the sidewalk and I kind of look at the eyeball of the property and say, hey, this looks pretty bad. I'm guessing that maybe the interior is bad as well. This probably is a condemnable property. I'll reach out to the owner and we'll try to get consent, because we love consent. If you say, yeah, sure, go in, we ask permission. But sometimes we can't get in contact with the person. Maybe the person's deceased. Maybe the person lives somewhere, we can't find them, or we don't have a good working telephone number. So then we will apply for a search warrant through housing court to actually get into the property. So just like you would think of a police function, if they're trying to get into your property to see what's going on and quote unquote gather evidence, is what we're doing for a property, they ask for a search warrant. So do we. Then once a judge executes or signs that search warrant, we have to execute it. So then we go back to the property, we post that search warrant on the property and say, hey, we're coming in with the judge's permission. And we look around. If we see violations that prove that the property is condemnable, we'll write it all out on a piece of paper, a violation notice, and then we'll mail it to the owner. And any other interested party, if the mortgage is still on the property, any interested parties, lien holders, If the person's deceased, we have to find all their children and heirs. A lot of times people don't have wills. So sometimes these children, it may be 5 children all over the place in the world. So we have to serve notice to everyone that has like an interest, any type of interest, small, large, in this property. Because if we tear it down in the long run, essentially what we're doing is eliminating that person's right in the property. Like, this could have been their childhood home that they just have so many memories in, they want to save. Maybe they didn't even know that their Uncle Billy that used to live there left the property.
Right.
So we just have to let people know, like, hey, these are our intentions with the city. The property is vacant, it's condemned, and we plan on demolishing it. There's a notice on the violation that says that exact thing. At any point in time before essentially the property is on demo contract, a person could pull permits to rehab it. You have a finite point in time where you can file an appeal if you want to dispute that it's condemned, or whether or not you think that we should demolish it. Maybe you want to demolish your own property. Maybe you think it's cheaper. I mean, a whole host of things can happen. But we do give opportunities for people to redeem the properties. But if all of our service is good, our law department has approved that file for demolition, we move forward to the process of demolishing. Now that's another long process because
this takes time.
Yeah, it absolutely takes time.
People think you can just do it instantly, and you can't.
You can't. I mean, there's a very, very limited circumstances where we can. If there's a fire and the property is essentially unstable and it's going to collapse, we do. If we do have sometimes properties do collapse. I mean, not even a fire, they're just unstable where foundations have subsided or a variety of other things. We do have emergency authority to do that. But we use that sparingly because we know when we tear down something, essentially we are taking someone's piece of property away from them.
Right.
But once we tear it down, we go through asbestos survey. Every property that we tear down, unless it's unsafe to do so, gets an asbestos survey. We abate the asbestos. Every property has to use water as a dust suppression method. So if you see demolitions going on out there and the contractors are not using water, call us immediately. And we will stop the demolition until the contractor does the right thing and put water on the property.
Are there other things that we should look for aside from water?
Definitely, if we make sure our contractors do not cause any more damage than was already there. So say, for instance, sidewalks. That's a common thing because these machines are really big.
Right.
So make sure that the contractor should never leave the condition of a property worse than what it was already in. So but we have pictures. I mean, we have procedures in place for this, but sometimes neighbors just see different things than what we see on photos or what our inspectors might see when they come out. But water is number one, making sure that damage isn't caused. If our demo contractors mistakenly, if something happens and maybe a piece of your siding gets damaged when a demolition is occurring, call us as well, because we facilitate the contractor fixing that because they are responsible for that. And if they can't make that happen, then we can make an insurance claim to make sure that somebody fixes and brings you back whole to where you need to be. But also with demolitions, as I mentioned with board up, it's not a free service. Every demolition average cost is $10,000. Absolutely, we have them that cost more, we have them that cost less, but we bill the property owner. So although when we tear the property down, John Smith will still own the piece of grass that's underneath the parcel, but they will get an invoice. If that invoice is not paid, then it goes to the tax duplicate. It's certified to your taxes one time a year, just like grass cutting is, delinquent water bills are, etc. Demolition and board up bills are as well. Now, if those bills don't go unpaid, it goes kind of like out of the city's hands, the county. They may initiate a foreclosure process. If they do that, then more than likely that parcel of land will end up coming back to the city land bank. If it comes back to the city land bank, that's when the Department of Community Development, they have the authority, they grant those as side lots and use those for other development projects.
I was gonna say, like, what if no one's there, like no one owns it? So it just comes back to the city then. How many homes have been raised roughly this year?
This year, we've raised about 436 structures, and we count structures. A structure is, a garage is a structure, an apartment building is one structure, a home is one structure, etc. So when I say 436 structures, it's everything in between.
Yeah.
It's a one home, it could be a 50-unit apartment building, and it could be a garage. So, and we're on target, so by the end of the year, we should have raised and or on contract around 750. Right now, we have that was my goal this year. We should surpass it because right now we have about 674 436 raised, about 230 some odd that are on contract, and we're still chugging along, and we have a couple months left to go.
Who funds the demolitions?
Variety of sources, and it depends just what year. This year, I am mainly using, Mayor Jackson gave around $27 million over about 2.5 years to the Department of Building and Housing for demolitions along the Safe Routes to School area, and that particular funding source is K through 8 CMSD schools. We took that geography and expanded it 1,000 feet around a walking safe route to those schools. In theory, that's what it is, but in practice, really, it covers most all of the city. So that funding is our #1 funding source. We were just granted another $2 million from the Cuyahoga County Demolition Fund. So that comes straight from Cuyahoga County. That will raise about 200 structures, give or take. So that's a good source. We also each year get an allocation of CDBG, Block Grant, Community Development Block Grant funding from HUD. That's funneled through our Community Development Department. That funding mostly goes towards emergency demolitions and boarding of our structures. And just throughout the years, we've had a variety of different funding sources, be it federal funding or state level funding through the Attorney General's office to facilitate demolition, but it's a costly endeavor.
Right.
Because if you think that an average demolition cost is $10,000, right now we probably have a little bit below 4,000 properties that need to be raised in the city, and that doesn't even take into account the large commercial structures. There's a lot out there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of money that needs to be put at the problem, but thankfully the mayor definitely has stepped up to the plate. $27 million is not just a drop in the bucket. It goes a long way.
A long way.
Yes.
Does building housing handle trees or abandoned cars that are on these lots or homes?
Now that's a thing that absolutely trees we do not try to touch. Our arborists here at the city love trees, and as I do as well, and they're very protective of our tree canopy and what we have just in our city. I mean, the Forest City. We
Right.
just have we have a lot of trees in the city, and building and housing is not a tree expert. So if you have a tree problem, definitely contact the Department of Public Works, and you can get back to the arborist, and they can handle that. Now, for abandoned cars, yes on some, no on others. Now, keep in mind the authority for building and housing, our department, is over the structure. And then that goes back to the owner of the structure. So sometimes people call us about, hey, there are 10 cars in the street, parked in the street. I can't touch that because the street essentially is a city right of way, so I can't cite the city and I don't have any authority. Police department, they can run a license plate and figure out who the car belongs to. I don't have that mechanism.
Right.
I can figure out who the property belongs to. So if there are vacant or abandoned cars, junk cars at vacant properties, I can cite those. Or even if they're abandoned cars or junk cars that are in your neighbor's driveway and they just, have a lot of them,
Yeah.
I can take care of that issue too. If there are abandoned or junk cars that are on city-owned lots, so those vacant lots that I mentioned that may be owned by the city, that would be an issue that the police could handle in conjunction with community development because they own those lots. So they could get those cars removed.
That makes sense. What do you think is the biggest misconception about building and housing?
Wow, that's a loaded question. I think that in general, people don't realize all the things we do in the Department of Building and Housing. I think a lot of times maybe our department is whittled down to just the code enforcement and the bad actors that have properties that aren't so great in the city. And that's just really a small portion of what we do. I mean, it's an important portion, definitely. But if you think about in the city, every year we have around, maybe 17,000, I think, maybe permits issued every year. Yeah. And the construction value on those permits are over $1 billion. That's a lot of work that's going on in the city. Yeah. And that's a lot of inspecting that my inspectors are doing to just make sure that people are building things correctly or repairing things correctly, et cetera, and making sure that the safety of our citizens and our residents are important. It's very important to make sure that your house is wired correctly when you pull an electrical permit.
Right.
Our inspectors do that. It's very important to make sure that your hot water heater or your furnace is not causing a carbon monoxide issue when it's installed. It's things that are that simple that I think sometimes go overlooked for the people that work in our department. But I try very hard to make sure that my staff, really just knows and really just takes to heart how important the work is that they do throughout the city.
Anything else you think the viewers should know about the Office of Building and Housing?
I think that, every viewer should really know that we are committed. All 160 employees in some way, shape, or form are really committed to making the lives of the people in Cleveland better. It's just the testimony sometimes that I get from people, like a person that may say, hey, they want the property next door to theirs torn down because they can't get insurance anymore. Their insurance company has cut them off because they have a vacant property next to them. That's very important to me. I mean, just making what things that may not seem important to other people, it's important to me. I really take the philosophy or just the idea that when people call and complain to me, sometimes people say, oh, I'm just complaining and I know nothing's going to happen. That's not true. If you don't say anything, I never know about it. My staff never knows about it. People live with circumstances around, like when you think about complaints and vacant properties and boarding, all day, every day, all night. This is where they live. This is their community. And I can go home from my job and turn it off, and my inspectors can as well, but I understand that people that live there cannot.
Right.
So I make sure that my staff knows like how important it is. When somebody else's priority, we need to make it our priority too. We need to put ourselves in whoever person on the other end. If somebody needs an inspection tomorrow because they need to move people into the apartment building that they've rehabbed, it's important for them because important to their business model.
Right.
We need to just make sure we understand where people are coming from, and that's what I aim to do.
How can we get more information?
Any more information that you need from us, feel free to call our department. The numbers should be listed at the bottom of the screen, but our main line is 664-2282. If you have a complaint, you can email the complaint email that's at the bottom of the screen. If you have any questions, comments, things that we can do better, things that we're doing great so I can pass on to my staff, please just let me know.
Well, thank you so much, Director, for being here. It's been a pleasure
Yes,
learning
thank you
about
for
what's
having me.
going on in the city and how we can maintain our homes and what's necessary.
Yes,
So thanks.
thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Community Spotlight. As always, we'll have this information for you at tv20cleveland.com. I'm Leah Longbreak. Till next time.